Generally speaking, if you're comparing marketing to revenue, firms are spending between 10 and 20% of their revenue on marketing. Anything below 10, most of the time, you're not going to see as much growth. So if you want long-term sustained growth, you need to be spending between 10 and 15%. For more aggressive growth, firms are spending 20, 25% of their revenue on marketing.
You are listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I'm your host, Tiffany Swidensky, and today we are here with Leah Miller of Firmly Profits. She's a fractional CFO, is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
And so I'll go ahead and turn it over to her and have her introduce herself and her company.
So like you said, I'm Leah Miller. I have Firmly Profits. We do bookkeeping and fractional CFO services for law firms only. I started doing other before, but now mostly just law firms. I started as a firm administrator and paralegal of a personal injury firm, and I was there for over 10 years and went out on my own 3 years ago. And now I'm doing this and loving it. So
you went out and started your own company at the same time, I guess I did, in Sharp Cookie, and that's pretty cool. I guess like something that I think about a lot is when I first started Sharp Cookie, ChatGPT really wasn't a thing. And then like a few months later, it absolutely was. What was that transition like for you, and how did you start using AI and these new tools in what you do?
So it's funny because everybody's always asking if I think AI is going to take over my job, like the bookkeeping side of things, because there's a lot of AI built into all of that. So like QuickBooks offers all kind of AI now, and I'm here to tell you that it's not taking over. Just because it's not to the place it needs to be yet. But I've used it just with processes within my business, things like that, helping to outline my process and my framework and what I believe. I talk to all my clients about the same things, but I've never like put it down on paper. So that's kind of where I'm scratching the surface as far as AI goes right now. But it's definitely interesting. It's interesting to see how it's changing what my clients are doing and dealing with and what they're investing in and things like that. So it's definitely become a part of it, but maybe not as much as some people say. Like I still believe in me using my beliefs in what I know with the finances. And obviously there's tools to help analyze some things, but the real value still comes from like me and the interaction with me and other people.
I was just talking with my mastermind group about this right before we recorded. And this might be controversial to say, but I really don't think AI is that good of a technical expert. Maybe when you get these specialized agents like what QuickBooks has now, they do become more technical than your generic Claude or ChatGPT. I know just by using it and I see the flaws and what it suggests for like a technical solution or a marketing solution, it's pretty obvious that it's not the same as somebody who's been doing it for a while and understands the ins and outs. And, you know, it's funny you mentioned QuickBooks because that's what I use. And I think I have all of their AI tools and I still have and want a bookkeeper for the foreseeable future because that's just one extra layer of security. And it's at the moment, it's the most critical piece is that human person.
Yeah, for sure. And that's even with like the analysis of the financials and stuff, it can spit out an analysis of your financials, but there's so much nuance too, especially law firm financials. From like the outside, it's pretty straightforward and like simple. I work with a lot of personal injury firms, probably 75% of my clients. I can't think of two firms that are doing the same thing. They're depending on where they are and what they're doing and like how their setup is and how their owners' personalities are. Every single firm is set up in a different way. So that's where I like to, when I'm coaching people, make sure that I'm not sticking everybody in a box. Obviously, I have processes I believe in, but at the same time, you know, people are always asking me, what's the benchmark for this? And I'm like, here's the benchmark, but that doesn't mean it's right for your firm. And I think using AI is the same way where like you put yourself in a box if that's all you're going to do. It's a fantastic tool, but you still need the human thought behind, does this work for me or does it work for everybody else?
I'm kind of fascinated as a fractional, somebody working with many different firms. What are the similarities and differences between these law firms? And like I'm mostly doing personal injury. So, like on the finance side, what are the things that a lot of law firms are exactly the same and may not realize it? And where are the parts where they're different?
I think a lot of the firms are all struggling with the same things. So it's hiring good people and being able to keep those people. That's the biggest struggle. I think a lot of times I was having a conversation yesterday. It was like, hey, you have the cases coming in, you have the cash to put into the marketing, but we need the people to help do the thing. And that's where a lot of them are the same, that they're struggling with that. I think some of them have done a better job at it than others, but like that's one of the big pain points. The things that are different, like I said, they're all just from the most basic of how they set up their accounting to the process, the financial process through the firm. Meet with clients who are mostly remote. So their process looks a lot different than clients who are in-house. And everybody has different beliefs and just how they do things. It's funny to think how different they are, but then they all still struggle with the same. Are we spending enough on marketing? Are we getting the leads? The cost of a lead went up. This week, Google's not working. So it's a lot of those same things. But I'm also seeing like geographically, I have clients in one area of the country where leads are just down. And it's like, we're spending the money, we're doing what we need to do, but leads are down. And then another part of the country where it's like, we're getting so many leads, we can't even catch up. We're turning down the marketing. So it's definitely geographical, makes a difference as well.
Budget wise. And weirdly, I don't get a whole lot of transparency into my clients' financials. I mean, it's obvious why you do, and probably obvious why I don't. I'm in the marketing side. But that means I don't really often get to see exactly how much is being spent and where, except for just the stuff I have access to. On the marketing side, just because I'm interested, where are firms spending the most money? And I guess like a follow-up question is, what's like one firm that's doing something different that maybe you can talk about in terms of how they're allocating their budget?
So when it comes to overall marketing budget, I don't necessarily get into the weeds of how they're spending the budget. I know for some, and we'll have conversations on, there's lead generation companies and you can buy leads. And is that a good idea? Are we spending it on SEO? So I hear all of that and see all of that. What I normally say is I know enough to know enough, but not enough to like, are the LSAs working here, but the SEO there, it's all over. So generally speaking, if you're comparing marketing to revenue, firms are spending between 10 and 20% of their revenue on marketing. Anything below 10, most of the time, you're not going to see as much growth. So if you want long-term sustained growth, you need to be spending between 10 and 15%. For more aggressive growth, firms are spending 20, 25% of their revenue on marketing. I have some that are up to 30%. And that's when you start getting that high, it's like, okay, how much can you personally give up to put back into the business to spend on marketing? But as far as like the specifics of how they're spending it, again, it's so geographical. I have one client killing it with like putting money just into SEO and not doing any Google ads. And then I have another one that's spending a lot on Google ads and it's working. And so it's so dependent on like where you are. Ones that are doing stuff that is out of the ordinary, I don't even know that it's out of the ordinary, but I've had a lot of conversations about it's so important to get referrals. A lot of times your high value cases come from personal referrals. And so it's like, we are hiring more attorneys to do the legal work to get the owners out of the legal work so they have the time to do the networking and the business development and things like that. So our percentage of revenue spent on people may be a little bit higher than the benchmark says to be, but we're intentionally doing that because we're getting more return on that kind of networking and marketing as opposed to putting that money into traditional marketing.
It's definitely odd, like what will work and perform at one firm and what doesn't work and doesn't perform in different geographic regions. And there's like so many factors that it makes it really difficult to pinpoint why is it working here and why isn't it working here. What does a CFO, a fractional CFO do that's maybe outside of what your ordinary bookkeeper accountant combo might do?
Okay, so there's three different things: bookkeeper, CPA, and CFO. So bookkeeper is literally just getting the information into QuickBooks, categorizing it, reconciling, doing all of that. And there's different levels of bookkeeping. So my firm, we do bookkeeping so that you can pull the information from your QuickBooks and really have a deep dive into your financials. There's more basic bookkeeping that's like literally the minimum of what you need to do your taxes. So that's bookkeeping. Then you have a CPA, which is what everybody knows. A lot of people are like, I have a CPA, and they just assume the CPA is doing all these financial things. CPA is focused on your taxes most of the time. A lot of times they're not even doing tax strategy. So people assume that they hire somebody to prepare their taxes, that person's going to actually look at their financials and say like, hey, you should really think about this. They're not. A lot of times they're so busy during tax season, they don't put any extra thought into it. Nothing against them. That's just not what they're contracted to do. There's tax strategists that you can find that would also do that. And then CFO is forward thinking. So you can get so caught up in what's happening in the past and not actually look to the future, which is where your growth is. So your growth isn't in the past. We can learn from the past, but we need to look at the future. So with CFO services, we're doing budgets. We're talking about cash flow. If we're personal injury firms, and I'm sure you run across this sometimes, there's high highs and low lows. And so through that, we still need to pay our people. We still need to keep the marketing going because we can't turn that on and off every time we have cash. And so we do a lot of cash flow forecasting and talking about what's the plan. Yes, we have cash right now, but next month we're not going to have as much cash, so we can't spend as much right now. And so that's what the CFO services is it's all forward thinking and just making sure like we're continuing, the growth that we want and need.
How many of these firms that you're working with have an in-house or full-time person on their marketing team? And if they have more than one, like what's the average? What's that looking like?
I would say probably 50% have some sort of in-house person, not necessarily a CMO. I'm trying to think. I think there may be only one or two that have like a full like C-suite type of person. Most of them, it's always like up in the air. I asked somebody one time, I'm like, what do all the marketing people do? I don't even understand. There's so many different like things. And so I have several that are working with fractional CMOs, just somebody who can corral all the things because there's so many different vendors. And then some that are just kind of ad hocing it themselves, or they have an assistant in-house doing it. It really varies. I do like when there's somebody overseeing it and there's a comprehensive like marketing plan. So a lot of times when I'm working with firms that are growing, I tell them, hey, you need to spend more on marketing. You have cash to spend, but I don't want you to spend it unless you have a plan. Have a person put together a whole plan, because what I see happens is they'll be like, oh, I want to go spend $20,000 on Google ads, but I'm also going to sponsor this thing and then I'm going to do this. And so lawyers they tend like the shiny marketing stuff is their favorite. And so they'll see all the shiny marketing stuff and just like buy all of it. And then we don't ever look back to see like, is it working? Is this bringing us towards our goals? So I'm a big believer in, yes, I'm going to tell you to spend the money, but I want a plan before we spend it.
And that's actually something that's law firms are, well, I want to say surprisingly bad at, but I've seen it so often that it's not surprising anymore, but just data tracking, because there are ways we can get precision with our marketing data to find out, is this working? Is this particular strategy working, or is it not? And I often am on a personal crusade to try to get law firms to cut out the activities that we're doing that are not actually bringing value to like the marketing overall. So my next question, I'm going to ask you the obvious one, which is like, when you're looking for a marketing plan, what are you looking for as a CFO? I guess like that's really hard to do if you don't have the right data or you don't have the right information to inform that plan and what you can forecast. So like, what are you looking for when you look for a marketing plan?
So a lot of what I do is helping firms start tracking that data, because I'll ask the same thing, like, what's your average case value? And they aren't sure. So when it comes to the marketing plan, again, I'm not so particular on how you're spending the money. I just want to make sure it's going to work. So if we start, I'm not a big fan of like putting everything into one thing either, especially with the marketing. Like I want to diversify. Let's see what's working. let's find the thing that's working and continue that. And then if we have some extra cash, let's start experimenting some things over here. Or so like, I just want to see a plan of like, these are where the dollars are going to go. And this is how we're going to track if it's working and how long it should take for it to start working. I understand it can take 6 months to really see what's going on with the marketing. But at the same time, I want to see that it's working eventually. And I want a plan of, okay, we're putting this much here and this is working because we're getting the leads or I always ask, what's your cost per lead? Because if our cost per lead is $3,000, but our average case value is only 8,000, everything's off for sure. But if our average lead is 2,000 and our average case value is 20,000, then we can say like, okay, it's working. So I really think, like you said, we need to have that data to see what's working and not working. And that I want to see as part of the plan. And I'm always big on, like, if we want to spend 30,000 and we're only spending 5 a month right now, I don't want to take 25,000 to get to the 30. It's like, okay, take 5 or 10,000 next month and let's see if it works. And then let's build on that plan.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say ROI because that is honestly the part that is like more difficult for me to get because like timeline these cases take. Sometimes it's 3-5 years before we see an outcome. And then at that point, like the marketing we used to generate that lead is gone to like, it's not even something we can do anymore for whatever reason.
Yep.
And so like, I get asked that from time to time, like, what's the ROI on this campaign? And I stop pretending I can answer. It's like, what are the case results? Can you tell me how much this case is worth? And then I can finally tell you that. Are you also looking at, it sounds like you are, but like cost per case, cost per lead, is that something that you're looking at and tracking for your clients?
That's something we've definitely tracking if they have the data. And that's something I ask about because I want to see that either stay steady or go down. But if it goes up, then we start looking at average case value, which you're right. It takes 12 to 18 months for today's case to settle. So it's more of a big picture. And that's where, like with the ROI question, and I tell people all the time, there's no way to look at it like definitively, like this is that ROI or this is what this looks like. It's more, let's look at the trends. So from the financial side, I want to see what is the trend for average cost per lead or average cost per case signed. And then I want to look at average case value pre-suit, average case value in suit, and what that looks like over time. Because like something I'm dealing with recently with a couple of clients is their cases signed has gone up substantially over last year, but our average case value is going down. So it's like, yes, we're signing double the number of cases, but our case value's gone down so much. So it's not translating the way we want it to be, unless that's our goal. And a lot of times that's not our goal. And so then we start looking like, are we settling cases for max value? Are we targeting lower value cases? Is that our goal? Is that what we want to do? And none of these answers are wrong, but it's all the data we need to look at over time to make informed decisions and make sure where we're spending our money is what we want to do.
Well, and it gets really complicated fast because one thing I'm looking at a lot or have been looking at a lot recently are Facebook ads. And I had 2 data sets to compare, client 1, client 2. Client 1 spent $50,000 on Facebook ads in a 3-month period. The other client spent the same amount on local service ads in the same 3-month period. And both of them pretty much signed a very, very similar number of cases for that investment. And the cost per case, CPA, was very similar for both law firms. What surprises people, I think, when I show them that data is just the volume of leads they had to get and process to be able to sign those cases. It's not a simple thing. It's Facebook ads, I think, generated 700 leads, and we signed 30 cases from those 700. And that 700 represents person power, manpower, the intake team who's answering, responding, and triaging these leads. That's usually more than one person when you're dealing with that kind of investment. It's the investment itself, it's the follow-up processes, and then it's the back end, the people who can support those cases that maybe you didn't have last quarter because you didn't make that investment. And so there are all these like hidden costs to generating more cases outside of the marketing budget. I don't feel like a lot of firms really take into account, like when you do something like digital marketing, you will see the value of your case go down because digital marketing tends to generate lower value cases, but a lot of them. And then referral marketing or something else generates higher value cases, but not as many. And so the equations and the formulas that we're using change at different scales. And that's really interesting. It's really interesting to think about.
Yep, for sure. And that's kind of where, again, none of it's wrong. Like if you want to do the digital marketing and have the lower value cases, that's fine. Somebody needs to handle them, right? But you have to just be very intentional about like, that is our goal. That is what we want to do, and not just let it happen and throw money everywhere. And that's where I'm talking about, like, let's have a plan for what we're doing. And if we look at it and we say like, okay, these lower value cases are generating revenue that's keeping us going so that we can focus on some of those bigger cases down the road. Do we have, $10,000 extra to put into that this month to get some of those going, and we have the manpower to handle it? Yes, that's the intentional decision, not just we signed 30 cases, so that's a good idea. Like, you want to be very intentional about what you're doing with it all.
So another question kind of in line with some of the stuff I've asked before, but as a law firm grows, and maybe law firms already know the answer to this, it's just for Tiffany's curiosity, but like as law firms grow, like which departments scale the fastest? Which department ends up needing the most people? Is it attorneys, paralegals, legal assistant, other support staff, marketing, C-suite? Like, who are we adding to the team as a law firm grows?
So that's really interesting question, because it really is so different depending on the firm and how they're set up. So I have firms that are doing a lot of their contracting overseas workers who are helping with some of it. They have in-house people, a combination of all of that. And so like it's different who they add. I have firms who they have attorneys handling a lot of everything. And then I have firms doing the exact same practice areas, but they have paralegals handling it. And then you have firms where the paralegals what you pay attorneys and things like that. And so it's so different in that situation. I would say there is a point where you stop scaling with people who are revenue generating as much. So like attorneys, paralegals, things like that. Those are all revenue generating. Once you hit a certain threshold, that's when you start looking at the marketing, the C-suite, like those extra people that aren't generating revenue, where in the beginning, everybody needs to generate revenue because you just need to keep the firm afloat. And then you do hit a certain margin where the owner isn't revenue generating anymore. They're out doing the marketing, the business development, things like that. And we're hiring all of those non-revenue generating people. There's not necessarily a specific revenue point when that happens because everybody's different in just their margins. But that's kind of like what it looks like is you do switch from revenue generating to non-revenue generating support staff.
Interesting how you answered that, because you put, for me, an owner making marketing content. They're no longer, as you put it, revenue generating, which I take you're literally meaning they do the work that makes the firm money. But, I guess the way I see it, I was like, I would have squarely put marketing in the revenue generating role because they're generating the cases. But I mean, kind of interesting the different ways you can categorize who generates,
The funny thing with that is when I do all of my reports, I call marketing my revenue generating bucket. And it's so like, I agree with you 100%. It was just like a different way that I was saying. And I'm even thinking like, if you're talking about an hourly billing firm, which we don't have, like, I don't work with a whole lot of those, but the owner doesn't bill hourly anymore is kind of what I meant. Like, so yes, I agree with you. Marketing, I actually call it revenue generating when I'm doing stuff. But in that sense, it's like the people who are actually working the cases, which make the revenue happen in real time.
I thought about this as a CMO and then also as a business owner, because I'm thinking about who I need to hire and who I need to bring on. I know, thinking about it, some of the people I eventually want to hire aren't going to help me make money or generate revenue because they're going to be doing something that's essential, but not maybe client facing or has nothing to do with marketing or being a marketing agency. And it's the same when you get really niche within a marketing department, because you could have somebody or hire somebody or outsource somebody who performs a very specific function, but that specific function we can't necessarily link to clients' cases leads. And so I think people can be like too analytical a little bit with stuff like that. They can look at like a role and say, like, do we get value from this role? I was just talking about the doorman fallacy on the mastermind call I was just on, where we tend to reduce the function to its essential roles. You know, a doorman holds open a door, but they also provide security, manage package routing, have a human connection, give instructions, directions to people. So when you eliminate that role, you're inadvertently eliminating all these other important things that they do that isn't obvious to somebody outside looking in. And so I feel like people can be too analytical when it comes to like, what is this? Why are we doing this? How is it making me money? And it's like, not literally, but editing a video doesn't make you money, but we can't publish videos without a video editor. So it's just interesting to think about. I didn't mean to go on too long though, but we are coming up on the end. So I got to ask my last two questions. What's something that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't necessarily get to?
I really enjoyed all of it. One of the biggest things I just always tell everybody is really just look at that data and look at your financials on a monthly basis. I think that's the biggest, we talked about a lot about like being intentional. And so I think if you're just intentional with what you're looking at with your financials, that's the most important part of all of this, because it can get like you and I talking back and forth might seem overwhelming for some people listening to this. And it's like, nope, just start at square one of like, what data do I have and how can I look at that?
Unfortunately, I look at my financials daily, maybe even like weekly if I'm doing it infrequently. And so I think the advice to somebody who's at that point is either you're growing or you need therapy. Monthly, I strive to look at that stuff monthly. I need to.
You are the exception to the rule, because if I can get a law firm owner to look at their financials monthly, I am winning.
I'll tell you this, but I have a bookkeeper. And my financials are not nearly as complicated as a law firm's. I just want a bookkeeper. I want that security. And I was talking with them and I was like, I'll get that to you. And they're like, don't worry, you'll get it to me. And they're like, you're actually the client I have who gets back to me the documentation first. And I was like, well, that's nice. So I guess I'm like overly anxious when it comes to that stuff personally. Well, how do you want people to look you up and learn more about you?
So you can always go to my website, firmlyprofits.com. I do free consultations. So if you're listening to us and you're like, I have no idea what I need, a bookkeeper, CFO, CPA, all of that, we can do a consultation, get to know your firm. I'll let you know what you need, what you don't need. I'm also on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn almost daily. I just try to share tips, tricks, things like that on there. And I love chatting with people on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you so much, Leah, for joining us here today. And we could probably have you on again and just talk more financial. Some of it's going to start going over my head, but I'll still probably enjoy it a little bit.
Anytime.
Well, thanks everyone for listening today. I really appreciate everyone joining us, and we will talk to you guys soon.